project is about enabling transparency in food supply chains via the implementation of innovative and mainly digital technologies to boost health, sustainability, and safety of products, processes, and diets. We have two excellent speakers for you today, two very interesting topics. We have listed as the first speaker Javier Lopez Palacios. He is the CEO of Uraphex. They are running a pilot in the Titan project that is financed by the Open Call, but in this case he will talk about another pilot that they are running in the HighFive project. And Uraphex is focusing on circular resources system, and what they want to promote is smart water reuse for the agri-food industry. The second presentation is about DNA-based methods to determine the species and the origin of seafood, in this case cod. And the message is that the cod that you are buying and consuming maybe is not as sustainable as you think, because it comes from another region or origin than you expect. And we are looking very much forward for Marine Cusa to present on this topic. And she's a marine scientist, and she's also a policy advisor at Oceana, and she lives in Copenhagen, Denmark. After the two presentations, there will be a short moment for Q&A to ask some questions, and then we will split into two groups. One will be with Javier and one will be with Marine. In the first one, we will talk about sustainable use of resources in general, and in the other one, we will talk about seafood traceability and authenticity. In the Titan project, it's quite complex. We have identified 4 key expertise areas. The first one is to enable consumers to make informed food choices. And in this, we focus on food safety and authenticity, but we also have activities on informing and educating the consumer. We want to facilitate supply chain sustainability, and for this we focus on environmental and social aspects, but also on economic aspects, especially to support SMEs. This webinar today fits in the third key expertise area, the implementation of new innovative technologies. And then we are talking about faster and more accurate detection methods, like DNA-based detection methods. We have 4 pilots where this technology is being used. And also Marine will speak about such technologies today. We have activities in resource-saving technologies, and that an example of this will be given today in the first presentation. And there's a lot of attention for disruptive digital technologies, like blockchain, like artificial intelligence, like Internet of Things. And that could be linked to the pilots today. I'm sorry. And then the fourth key expertise area is to take the food system approach, something that is quite complicated. That it means that for me that we do really the good thing to make sure that everybody has access to healthy and sustainable food, but that we also contribute to countering climate change and to the net zero strategy of the EU. This means that we want to move towards a sustainable food system, but that we also want to be successful in innovation. These webinars, also for today, are organized for the Titan network of expertise. We already have more than 180 people in our network. You can also become a member of our network of expertise, where you can be in contact with other experts, and where you can, let's say, actively contribute to shaping the future of transparency and innovation in the agri-food sector. The membership benefits include to join a vibrant community, to stay informed and contribute, to expand your network, to get early access to information and multimedia, and it could also be on funding. One of the organizations that is in a network of expertise from Titan, they were successful in submitting a proposal for the open call, so it can also help in this sense. And we are organizing a final event together with another EU project in June next year, and we very much would like you to be involved, maybe to propose presentations to support us in this, to make it a very successful and interactive event. So all partners from Titan and Food 2030 are proudly invited you for this event. The title is Innovations to Build Sustainable Supply Chains and a Fair Data Economy for a Better Food System. And we have planned for this 17 and 18 June in Brussels in the Sparks building. We have three main activities in this final event. We have three different stages where there will be oral presentations, and we expect to have more than 80 different oral presentations, and you are all encouraged to submit abstracts for this. We also expect to have at least 40 poster presentations. It could be for topics that were not approved for an oral presentation, but still can present a poster, but also submissions just for a poster presentation, what you want. We will have a marketplace with more than 40 startups. Titan will bring in 20 startups already. We are collaborating with the Catalyze project. They will bring in maybe 8 to 10 startups. We are talking with agri-food. Hopefully they will also bring in some startups. And then of course there are startups that are not connected to one of these projects or entities, but that we also cordially invite when they fit into the topics of the event. And then there will be a zone for networking. I see it more and more at conferences and events that people really like to meet each other, to talk, so we will facilitate this with a special zone. And we are working hard to arrange that we have 2 awards for the startups, maybe the most sustainable and the best one in food safety, but there could be other possibilities also depending on the sponsors for these awards. Then for the program, for the oral and the poster presentations, we have 4 tracks, and they are more or less aligned with the key expertise areas that I mentioned. One is enhancing food safety and reducing food fraud. One is promoting informed decisions for by consumers. The third one is building sustainable supply chains connected with traceability. And the fourth one is developing the data economy through data spaces. And for the presenters, we also plan to have 2 awards, maybe one for the best oral presentation and one for the best poster. And then we are thinking of young scientists for whom this is could be beneficial. Then I'll go quickly through the 4 tracks. So for the first one, enhancing food safety and reducing food fraud, we are thinking of subtracks like food safety management in general, microbial food safety, allergen management, digitalization of food safety and food fraud resilience, and new detection methods for food fraud and also maybe food safety. For the second track, enabling informed decisions by consumers, we have 2, let's say, subtopics. Improving the food environment, where we think of sessions for front of pack labeling for health and sustainability, reliable data collection and sharing with consumers, and maybe policy recommendations for a healthier food environment. The third subtopic is more focused on education and on healthy and sustainable diets, education focused on kids and their families, and school food programs to provide healthy food, but also to teach kids on where their food comes from. The third track, to build sustainable supply chains, we are thinking of a session about building the circular economy, the reduction of food loss and waste, precision farming and carbon sequestration, digitalization and supply chain management in general, environmental social governance and first mile traceability, and then we can talk about forced and child labor, and seafood traceability, because we have a specific passion for seafood. We have invited multiple presenters already on seafood topics, so we really would like to have one session dedicated to seafood. And then for the fourth track, developing the data economy through data spaces, we again have 2 subtracks. One is innovative production, transformation and monitoring methods, new technologies for sustainability. You will hear an example today. New portable or fast rapid detection methods. You also hear an example today, and applications for sensors, and maybe sensors are incorporated in the first presentation, but you will hear. And the second topic is more on the digital, innovating technologies and data spaces, federated data spaces, AI and machine learning, interconnectivity and Internet of Things, digitalization of SMEs, and of course data governance and privacy and fair data. The next webinar is now planned for November 24th, and we are talking with two eminent speakers, Frank Kumli from the Futuring Alliance in Switzerland, and we've asked him to give a presentation on transforming leadership learning, designing for sustainable systemic change. And we are talking with Jeroen Kandel, who is an associate professor at Wageningen University, and we would like him to speak about governance and resilience as entry points for transforming food systems to 2030. That's it from me, and I look very much forward to the presentations of today. So I stop sharing, and then the next speaker can join in. Manuela?
Yeah, Javier, I think he's there. He can just take the...
Yeah, I think it's our turn of Uraphex.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Thanks everybody. Javier is not here, okay, because he's not possible for to him be here now. But I'm Inigo. I'm project manager of Uraphex, and I'm going to present our new technology called CRS, where we are able to save 90% of reduction of water and 35% energy consumption in the agro industry in the retort systems. Okay, I'm gonna show you our presentation right now. Let me know you can see it correctly.
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay. So what we want to present, this is a CRS, Circular Resources System project, where Uraphex has already implemented in some customers here.
Excuse me, Ingo, maybe you can just put it in presentation mode. We're now seeing...
Yeah, now?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect, sorry. So our project is Circular Resources Systems. It's a new application where we apply our technology. We have already installed in 2 customers to pilot installing here in the north of Spain. We are in Navarra. And firstly, I'm going to present, Uraphex, we are a startup of Navarra, of the north of Spain, where we have developed a new technology in order to disinfect water without any kind of chemicals, achieving more than 90% of water reduction and elimination of the chemical uses in some agro process like disinfection of salads on this kind of vegetables. Okay. In this turn, I'm going to present our technology CRS, where we are able to take the energy and water of the retort systems in the 3rd and 5th range of agri-industry. So what we have realized when we started with our companies, the agri-food companies consume a large amount of water and chemicals in their production process, especially during the sterilization. Okay, here you can see a retort of a normal agro process. Okay, so today there is no sustainable and digital technology capable of effectively reducing this high impact environment impact and also economic impact in the process. Okay, so what we have developed is a sustainable and intelligent water treatment solution that combines FEX technology. I'm gonna present after it with some smart sensors, and everything is connected to our cloud platform. Okay, so this system enables chemical-free disinfection, real-time monitoring of water quality and resource consumption, and full traceability to ensure compliance with food safety regulations, as for example Eduard told before. Okay, all our system CRS is integrated directly into the cooling and filling circuits of retorts, and is connecting to the water recirculation process. So with our PLS, Uraphex system allows all the control logic to be programmed, making installation non-invasive and fully adaptable. This is something very specific and very important that our customers told to us. Okay, asked to us. Sorry. So what we do in our system, what we take is the water of the retort. We are able to disinfect with our technology without any kind of chemicals and with a very, very low chlorate production. And we are able to take this water to get into the next cycle of the retort. And we introduce that water with a very high temperature, in order 45 or 50 degrees. So there we have a very huge amount of energy savings in terms of heat that water. Okay. This is our technology that we have already patented. This FX is photoelectrocatalysis. What we do it in only one reactor. When we do is the first step. The first step is a photooxidation, it's a UVA, where we eliminate fungi spores and yeast. Okay, and in a second step of our reactor, what we do is we create, based on electron hole pairs, that technology, we create a very high amount of free radicals. Okay, the free radicals are some species, very oxidized species, what we are able to reduce in a big amount the COD, or the organic bacteria of that water, that flow. Okay, we take the water from the retort, we disinfect it with our reactors, with our FX, improving the safety food and also reducing the impact, the environment impact of the process. Yeah. So everything we have installed a lot. We install a lot of sensors. What we take all the water quality or the resources that we take in the process, and this we connect this all this info in our Urap. It's a digital platform providing traceability, calculating also micro risk, as we have developed in Titan project. Thanks to all people of the Titan that have support us in this project, inside this project. Okay, so this is what the main impact that we have with our technology. We are a 100% sustainable process. We save more than 90% water of this process. 100% micro safety. We eliminate the chemical biocides used in these flows. Very high technology, high water quality, which allows us to reuse this water many times, and big savings of energy in the retort process. Yeah. So I'm gonna in this diagram, what we take is all the water of the retort, inside the retort. After the end of the cooling process, we take all this water in one deposit, and during the first steps of the cooling process in the retort, we take all this energy, all this warmth of the water, and we take water from the cold deposit, and we through this system we take all the technology, all this energy. Okay, so for the next cycle, instead of start the warm up process in 15 or 10 degrees, for example, we start this process in 45 or 50 degrees. So this is a very high amount of energy that we can save. Also, having this water, everything disinfecting with our technology. So this is the presentation of CRS, and if you have any question or any doubt, you can contact us through this mail or our website.
Thank you very much for a clear presentation. Maybe we save the questions for later when Marina has presented. It's now the time for Marina. So please share the screen and give your presentation, and we will answer the questions afterwards.
Yes. All right. So let me try and share the screen first. Hold on. Is this good? Are you in the right mode? Yes, perfect. Awesome. Okay, let me know if ever it cuts because my internet is imperfect at the best of times. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this seminar. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just introduce myself briefly. So as Edward was saying, my name is Maureen. I work as a marine policy advisor for Oceana, so I have a rather convenient name. I'm also a researcher working at the Technical University of Denmark, DTU, and I'm also a Pew Marine Fellow. So I do wear quite a few hats, including hard hats occasionally. And what we'll be talking about today and looking into is some of the advances in molecular tools that can be used in the context of seafood transparency. So I know you said you had quite a few presentations on seafood, but I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the world of seafood production. So I'm going to try and kind of introduce some of the people here briefly to it. So the seafood production landscape is interestingly growing very rapidly. It's, as you can see now, aquaculture has surpassed the production of wild capture fisheries, and there's about 180 million tons of seafood from aquaculture and fisheries that is being produced yearly. And what I do want to note here is how it may appear as if wild capture fisheries are captured sustainably since the 90s, because you can see it kind of flatlined. That sounds terrible, but really it is a straight line. And but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is sustainable. It does mean, however, that we have been expending our fisheries to include many, many species that we didn't necessarily fish in the 90s in order to meet the growing demand. So we have a trade, which in fact is one of the most traded food commodities in the world, that includes hundreds of species. It's extremely complex. Right. What is important to note as well is that these are some of the data that are provided by the FAO. However, it should be noted that there is a lot of data gaps. And this map, also in the latest SOFIA report from the FAO, shows that, in fact, not all fish stocks are being reported on. And there are some regions of the world where more than half are not being reported on, and we have no information on them. However, again, as mentioned, the trade is important, and that means that there are definitely species from stocks on which we don't know anything that do end up on the European market. So just briefly, because I do work quite a bit at the science policy interface, just want to mention quickly the seafood labeling rules, at least in Europe. They're pretty good. They're probably, in fact, if not the best in the world, I would say. They're certainly better than some of those that we see in North America. And under the Common Market, the CMO, the Common Market Organization for Fisheries and Aquaculture Products in Europe, the seafood products, at least for fresh and frozen fillet and whole fish, need to contain information on the scientific name, the common name, and the geographical catch location, for example, amongst others. But these are very important information when it comes to conservation, for example. But there is a loophole, and some of the seafood products don't need to have any information on them. So for example, that includes preserved and prepared products like canned fish. So canned tuna, for example, in Europe, you don't need to have any kind of information on them. You could literally just write tuna, and that's good enough. So just wondering whether that's good enough for you. So now moving on to the use of molecular tools. And the reason why I mention labels is because they are very relevant to molecular tools. Often molecular tools have been used to kind of contrast with that label information to see if there is any instances of mislabeling. Molecular tools can be used for a variety of things, but they're often more kind of rather than a traceability tool, they're more of a verification tool. So I prefer calling them a transparency tool. So they, of course, have been used quite extensively for identification of species, verification, but they can also be used for enforcement purposes. For example, for doing some direct investigation, leading to enforcement and possibly prosecution, or as well for deterrence. So control, the control or monitoring or surveillance of products that are randomly tested, for example, at landing sites. I'm sure that many of you have heard about seafood mislabeling. It's been all over the news for the last, well, time passes, so 15 years at least. It started, I want to say, to make quite some noise around 2008, 2010 is when you started having some of those first papers that were really showing the extent of seafood mislabeling on the markets. And then since then, it's kind of boomed. So there's hundreds and hundreds of mislabeling studies that have used DNA to identify what the species is and then say, well, there's a lot of mislabeling happening here in this country and this market for this species, etc. So what's worth noting here is that the rate of mislabeling will depend quite substantially depending on the species you're talking about. So some species like the Pacific red snapper have instances of up to 90% mislabeling rate, so which is very high. But in general, at the global scale, the mislabeling rate is about 20 to 36%. But again, this is an average, and we're talking about a trade where you have hundreds of different species. So some of them will be highly mislabeled, others not. It also depends on the region, the country, and the marketplace. Is this a study that's looking at mislabeling in restaurants versus fishmongers or supermarkets? So all of these elements are important. Now, the rest of this presentation will focus on moving beyond species mislabeling, because again, as I said, there's been a lot of studies that have looked into species mislabeling. What has not been looked into so extensively is the mislabeling of the catch location or the point of origin. Partially because it is more difficult to do. I do have a pointer that's just moving around and I'm not sure why. But it's not mine. My mouse is also moving around and it's not the pointer. So this ghost is pointing things around and I'm sorry about that. So the catch location is kind of different. I've worked with authorities who have told me, all right, well, it's great that you can tell me what species this is, but I can actually see it with my own eyes. However, what I would find more useful is if you could tell me where that fish was caught. So let's take a very, very simplified example of, let's call this cod. It doesn't look like cod, but let's call it cod. And here, this is an example where you'll have three populations. So you have three populations, one that's in the Barents Sea, one in the North Sea, and one in the Northwest Atlantic. And these populations for that one species, so in this case, Atlantic cod, are relatively isolated. So they don't reproduce with each other because of this isolation and these various barriers that prevent that kind of interaction between populations. And as a result, they are somewhat genetically isolated. So isolation is a bit of a big word because you'll always have some mixing, especially in marine organisms, but they do have somewhat distinct genetic makeup. So in this case for cod, we looked at two different populations. So population one, let's say from the Northeast Arctic, so the Barents Sea and the coast of Norway, and then the North Sea, so let's call it population two. And what needs to happen first is that you have to look into these kind of genetic differences between these two different populations. You have to establish that as a baseline first. And then once you've established that as a baseline, you can have your sample of cod. So in this case, for example, the fishmonger labeled the cod as coming from the Gulf de Gascogne, which is west of France and Spain, which is very unlikely. That's not really a region where you have commercial cod. And we can assign it back with a certain level of probability to these populations. And so because of the nature of population genetics and the fact that the populations do mix to some extent, your assignment is always going to be probabilistic. It's never going to be perfect like for species. It's not going to be black and white, but you will be able to assign your sample with a certain level of certainty back to its population of origin. So for the particular study on cod, we sampled cod where you've got those red marks here, those dark red marks. So we sampled cod in Spain, in France, Germany, and in the UK. And then it was a lot of cod. I did eat a lot of cod for many months. And then we simply try to assign it back to either this location where you have, I mean, there are several populations, but there is a fairly large, big population of cod from the Barents Sea that's relatively isolated genetically from the North Sea. And so these are some of the results. So effectively, we had so I just want to say, I didn't put it on the slide, that the mislabeling rate for the species was very low. We looked at 111 cod samples, which is quite a few from these countries across Europe. And we had about a less than 2% mislabeling rate. So it was very low, and I think that's pretty good. It shows that there's probably quite some improvement on this front. However, when it comes to the catch location, that was not the same picture. We had about almost a 30% mislabeling rate. So here is kind of like a bit of a breakdown. You have on the left the Northeast Arctic, so the cod that were claimed as coming from the Northeast Arctic, and then on the right, those that were claimed as coming from the North Sea. And you can see, in fact, the light gray is the incorrect label. You can see that most of the ones coming from the North Sea, or at least claimed to come from the North Sea, were actually mislabeled, and they came from that very large Barents Sea population, which makes a lot of sense. This is where most of the cod comes from. Now, one of the questions that I've had before was, why would anyone want to claim that their cod comes from the North Sea and mislabel cod from the Barents Sea? Why would they want to claim it comes from the North Sea, given that that population is overexploited and unsustainably fished at the moment? Why is that a thing that people would do? Given, let's imagine that they are mislabeling willingly. And I can tell you why that is something that happened, because it happened right in front of my eyes at some fishmongers. It is, I think, in the large part, is because a lot of sellers want to show that the fish they sell is local. And so in this instance, most of the cod that was labeled as coming from the North Sea, and that was in fact mislabeled, were cod that we sampled in the coast of the UK at fishmongers, who simply wanted to show that they were selling cod that were in fact caught locally, but they were not. There were cod that came from a long way away and that were probably fished by gigantic freezer trawlers in the Barents Sea. And this circus plot on the left shows some of the claimed provenance we had for cod. So you can see we had, of course, a lot of it claimed to come from the Northeast Arctic / the Barents Sea, and that was a lot. Most of it was correctly labeled. But then we had a variety of other cod that were claimed coming from other locations, and most of them did come from the Barents Sea, which again does make a lot of sense. So I do want to point out that the method is not perfect and there is some uncertainty around it. And this is where, because of the nature of population genetics and its probabilistic nature, that is one of the reasons why it hasn't been used as much in the sphere of mislabeling. And however, it can definitely be something that could be merged with other tools like stable isotopes, for example. So I'm not a stable isotope expert here, but I have worked with a stable isotope expert, and we tried to see how these tools can be combined. They work very well in combination because they look at very different things. Your genetic analysis is, oh, I'm sorry about this. I'm not doing this. There is a ghost that's moving my pointer around. The genetic analysis is, in fact, this is very distracting. I'm just going to pretend that it's not me. Is, in fact, okay, well, sorry about that. Is looking at kind of discrete assignments. So it's really assigning your individuals back to populations of origin that are in specific areas, whereas your stable isotope studies here are going to be looking at continuous, it's going to be an assignment over continuous regions. So you're going to get different types of assignments, which can help very much if you're trying to combine them. It's not something we did for this cod study, but I think that it would be kind of the next logical step to see whether or not the stable isotopes do in fact confirm what we noted with the genetic studies. So yeah, that's it. I did want to kind of point a few things here. The mislabeling studies that have been published over the years do show that you do have a very complex supply chain where you have, in fact, some issues in terms of transparency and traceability, unfortunately. And enforcement and authorities, bodies do need these types of tool in order to be able to, well, to enforce and to make sure that certain instances of fraud or mislabeling, whether it is fraud or not, don't happen. However, there is a bit of a divide between some of what researchers provide, which is often just evidence-based, and what authorities need, which often will be practical enforcement tools and knowledge. And then the next thing here is, yeah, I did want to point out the fact that molecular tools can go a step further now and go kind of beyond species identification to looking at the catch location. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions and I'll be happy to try and answer them. And I'm sorry about my pointer going crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what happens. Thank you very much
weird.
for presenting. It's very interesting. I think I have a lot of questions. But I'll first ask a question to the first speaker. Because you have said several times that you, let's say, clean the washing water from the retort process. And if I understand it well, then this water does not come into contact with the product.
Well, the water that we take from the retort, it's in contact with the product. So, firstly, we take the after finish the retort process, we take the final water of the retort, of the inside of the retort, and we take it this water to our first deposit. Is the cold water deposit, we call it. Okay, so in the next cycle, so we take this water to warm up during the cooling process of the next cycle, and we fill in next cycles, we fill in the retort with this water, okay, that we have already take from the retort. We have already also disinfect and treat with our technology, with the photoelectrocatalysis, and we warm up to 45-50%. So yes, it's in contact with the product at the end of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's say I am used to use retort when you have products in the packaging that you are
Yeah, well,
eating.
yeah, that's true. It's in contact not with the product, but yes with the package of the product. For example, we have now working with potato meal. We have working with for the 5 range what they produce couscous plates, okay, couscous food, yeah, and the package of the food of couscous, and it's not in contact with the product. It's not in contact with. It's contact with the package, okay, with the how do you say, with the
Packaging.
yeah, with the packaging, yeah.
Yeah, because that
But
makes a big difference. Because when the water would come into contact with the product itself, then probably the demands would be higher.
Yes. Well, this is another. We have 2 applications. We have an application called Uraphex, where we are in contact with the product, but we have this application for potatoes washing process, for vegetables as lettuce, as carrots, for example, all these kind of vegetables. Okay, we take this water, we clean and we disinfect it, and it's in contact with the process, yeah? But it's a different application. In this application that we are talking today, the CRS, is only with the package. It's true that many times, inside the retort, sometimes the package is broken because of the pressure of whatever, and in this kind there is a filter to eliminate that solids, but are different applications that we have for our technology.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. And Marine, from your presentation, you made a very interesting remark that went a bit too fast for me. But I think you have an interesting view on traceability, origin, transparency, and you said that's maybe why I call it transparency. Can you explain this a little bit more? Do you know what I mean?
You mean the difference between traceability and transparency, and how where the DNA fits, for example?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so traceability is, I mean, again, you can define things differently in different ways, but in general, the kind of accepted definition, I want to say, is basically the transfer of information from one level of the supply chain to the next. So that's traceability, right? And ideally all the way up to the consumer, and so from boat to plate. Transparency refers more to the access of information, right? Access to the information. So that particular information that we're talking about, that's being transferred from one level of the supply chain to the next, is obtained through transparency. Do we have any kind of transparency on this? So genetic tools are interesting because they're often, and in the title actually of my talk, I wrote that they can be used for traceability. So it's often used interchangeably. You're often going to see the mention of genetic tools for traceability. But I kind of want to say that they don't really enable traceability per se. They're not a traceability tool. They're not going to allow this transfer of information from one level of the supply chain to the next, like blockchain or whatever. Blockchain is a traceability tool. Genetic is not a traceability tool. It's a transparency tool. It's going to shed light on whether or not the information is accurate. So that's why I make that distinction. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, because transparency and traceability are linked, you could also argue they are a traceability tool in one way, in making sure, in validating the accuracy of the information. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
Good.
There was someone from another EU project, Nives Ogerink. She's from a university in Slovenia, and she views at is that you for traceability you need to really have data, the data that you, for instance, collect with your DNA test, but you also need to have a digital system
Exactly.
where you can, let's say, share the data or make the data accessible. And when you want to bring it to a higher level, it could be done with blockchain so that it's not mutable after it has been entered. And yeah, I think I see transparency more as, let's say, maybe showing to consumers, for instance, what has happened in the supply chain. But what has happened in the supply chain should be backed up by data, and that is something that you manage with your traceability. But
And transparency, I just want to add, can be at any point of the supply chain.
yes,
It can be just simply authorities looking into whether or not what the fishers are giving them is transparent, right? So we often think about it at consumer level, but it really applies to the whole supply chain.
yes, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And then I had a question about the mislabeling, because you gave an example that let's say someone that sells the fish to consumers would like to give the impression that it's local.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so of course it depends how the supply chain is composed, how it is organized. But that would mean that maybe the ship that lands the fish gives the right label, and maybe the distribution center gives the right label, but that the the salesperson at the end of the chain makes an incorrect change.
Yeah. In this case, yes. But you're right in pointing out that, in fact, the mislabeling could happen at any level of the supply chain. So I'm not making any kind of inference in general when it comes to mislabeling. We don't know why it happens and where it happens. It could be anywhere. Often I kind of want to say that a lot of the time I think it happens at the very end of the supply chain, but it could be earlier. In this particular case, when it comes to the mislabeling of the geographical catch location of cod, so that was very specific. It was actually mostly that cod that was sold by fishmongers in the UK. And so in that particular case, I think that there are great chances that the reason why it was mislabeled was simply to cater to the consumers who want to consume local. And so it would probably have been mislabeled at the level of the fishmonger. That's probably where I would see that happening. But
Yeah,
it could be anywhere. It could literally be anywhere, depending on which species and which region you're talking about and what type of consumers you're catering to, etc. There's many reasons why you would want to mislabel. And sometimes it's an error. Sometimes it really is just mistakes.
yeah. I think what's it called? The Danish squad that was looking for, let's say, issues with food fraud or issue with authenticity. I think that in their report it said that about 60% of potential food fraud cases has to do with the labeling, and then there will be a large percentage of this that is unintentional.
Yes. And so,
Mm.
which is why I tried not to call it fraud. I often call it, as much as possible, mislabeling, because mislabeling incorporates both the fraud aspect, but also the error aspect. Yeah, and it is very difficult to establish whether it was fraud or not.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I have another question for, yeah, I see identification Uraphex. I don't see the name of the person. So you have two, let's say, techniques to disinfect the water that you apply after each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our technology patent is called photoelectrocatalysis. Okay, but when we have developed a patent is just one reactor, is like a half meter of height. It's all everything is included in our system. Is one reactor of 6 liters of volume, but we are able to treat around 15-20 cubic meters per hour just with one reactor. Okay, in our system we can install at least as maximum 5 reactors, for example. Yeah, so we are able to treat as maximum between 70-90 cubic meters per hour. Okay, but our technology is just in one chamber. We apply photooxidation with UVA and UVA combination with UVC just to eliminate this yeast or spores. But what we do mainly with this UVA is to, for one side, make an electrooxidation when we create free radicals, because with the UVA impact to the dioxide titanium of our reactor, and it provokes the electron walk, and at the end is the free radical that reduce the COD of the water. Okay, and in the other chamber, in the part of the in the middle of the reactor, in fact, what we do is an electrooxidation just with the salt of water, with any kind of chemicals. We are only applying energy. It's installed anode and cathode, and we are able to, with energy, as I told before, just to create some oxidants to disinfect water, as for example, free chlorine or peroxide, oxygen and ozone. Okay, but mainly free chlorine and peroxide. So with this mix of oxidants, we are able to achieve a great amount. We are able to disinfect water, for example, when we treat or we disinfect iceberg, lettuce salads, iceberg, okay, with a really high amount of free chlorine demand, we are able to produce or to disinfect the product with our technology. What we do especially is we don't apply any kind of chemicals, any kind of biocides. Also, we produce a very, very low amount of chlorates. Subproduct chlorates is there is a maximum that you can have in the water that you wash, that you use to clean your production. So our technology produces a really, really low amount of chlorates.
Yes, but do you have to add them beforehand?
Sorry,
Because
we have to.
you use a low amount of chlorides. Do you add some beforehand?
No, nothing. Just only with tap water here, with 10 ppm of chlorides, for example, we are able to have between 2 and 5 ppm of free chlorine, and our production of chlorates it's around 0.05%. So it's very low.
Yeah, and the chlorides, will they be stable or will they disappear again? Will they be?
No, are stable in the water. Are stable in the water because after it disinfect with the COD with the organic material, you can take it again. There is no need to put salt, for example, or chlorides. Yeah, in the water, because the efficiency of our technology is really high. In fact, we apply energy, but we use less than 100 watts per cubic meter. So it's this is something that we have the performance of our reactor. We have improved very high during this year and a half with the pure food, with the Titan with the Titan project that we have developed. Because in the past, for example, the lettuce iceberg was impossible for us to disinfect, and now we are achieving more than, sorry for my English, 1.5 logarithms of reduction of mesophils in the salad, in the lettuce. So it's a big opportunity. Yeah. And everything saving a lot, saving more than 90% of water. So.
Yes, and what you do, is this in line with regulations for food safety in Spain? and also for other countries in the EU? Do you know?
Yeah, we know. In fact, well, you know the regulation in Europe. You have, for example, talking about chlorates. You have a maximum of the product that you can have. Okay, it's, for example, in salads is 0 ppm of chlorates per kilo of lettuce. Okay, this is a regulation of Europe. But here in Spain there is another regulation where the water that you use in the agro industry must be tap water. There is the specification, for example, for chlorates are less than 0.7 ppm of chlorates in water. It's a really, really low amount of chlorates, and we are inside the regulation, so we apply with our technology.
Yeah, I know Spain has a specific regulation in this respect. Okay, so you have to use tap water, but then
Yeah.
In this regulation, it's allowed to reuse it because there can be questions about it.
Yeah, it's well, there's let's say it's not clear for the agro industry right now from 2 years ago in Spain, because you can you are not you can the quality of the water must be tap water, okay, and there is no clear what is exactly tap water in terms of recirculation inside the mill. Okay, you can, because in the same moment as you put the tap water with the product, in fact, for example, the turbidity or COD, or there are more of quality parameters that go outside this regulation. Yeah, so this is some discussion that it's through last 2 years in Spain having in the agro industry.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Now I move back to Marine again for a question. So when I was in Spain, maybe 1.5 years ago at Food for Future, I met someone that was representing the Spanish fishmongers. And I understood that the number is going down. So you presented in your first graph that seafood consumption is going up, it's growing strongly. But I wonder how this fish is being sold, brought to the consumer, because apparently the fishmongers, the small sales persons, are disappearing. And maybe otherwise Manuela can confirm this, but that is what I understood from this person. I don't know if you know what is happening at the end of the chain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fairly accurate statement, and it probably, for the most part, has to do with the type of fish that people are consuming nowadays. So, from what I've read and from what I understand, there's an increased consumption of processed fish, or fish that are already prepared, like either frozen or fish fingers, or things that you just pop into the oven and you just eat it battered. And so as a result, these are the types of products that are mostly sold by supermarkets, and people don't go so much to their fishmongers anymore to buy fresh fish. And but I think that is something that it's a trend that you see across many different markets, right? Not just fish, unfortunately. So yeah, it doesn't mean that people are not consuming fish anymore. There is a slight reduction of seafood consumption in Europe. But over the global scale, let's say, seafood consumption is really increasing fast. But yeah, in Europe, we are changing our habits and the type of fish we consume and how we consume and how we prepare it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now, at the end, you made an important remark. There were a lot of important remarks in your presentation, but about the let's say the accuracy of your methodology, and you propose maybe that it can be combined with another methodology. And of course, the authorities, they would like to have results fast. Ideally, they can measure on the spot. So what do you think is what can we expect in the future? What do you think? What new combinations of detection methods can we expect, and what would be really helpful for the food authorities?
So I have a few things to say here. First, there's the identification of species. And then second, there's the identification of the catch location. When it comes to the identification of species, those methods are very well established. And there has been some really quick field methods that have been developed. So that's in place, or in place, not necessarily in place by the authorities, but it's something that they could definitely integrate. And I know of several projects that, including one that I've worked on, where we've worked with the authorities, we've showed them how these systems work, how these different tools work. And I had a photo in the presentation working with the Marine Management Organization where I was showing them some quick DNA extraction method in the field. I removed it because my presentation was too long. But the point is that these tools exist and that there's a lot of different governmental bodies that are trying to apply them in these kind of routine checks that they do. So that's, I think, for species identification, we're getting there. On the other hand, when it comes to identifying where the species was caught, that's a completely different question, and it's much more complicated to do. It has to be done in a lab. At the moment, it has to be done with someone who knows what they're doing. There's a lot of bioinformatics involved. So in this case, I think the best is for the labs that do these kind of things to make sure that they are known for this and to make sure that authorities know this is an option. So there's an example here in Denmark, as you mentioned earlier, I'm based in Denmark, where some, I think they were actually in Sweden, but they called it where it was like some authorities in Sweden that caught a very big cargo of cod that were claimed to come from the North Sea or something. And I think they were suspicious that it was not caught in the North Sea, that it was caught maybe in Skagerrak or in somewhere in the Bering Sea. And so they called this lab based here in Denmark that I work with actually, and they've asked them if they could do these if they could use the genetic analysis, the population genetic analysis to identify where the cod came from. So they did. And in this case, there were two very important things that the authorities had. They had a lot of samples, which means they had many replicates. So the results were returned to them with a very high certainty. And second, they also had the logbook. So they were able to combine the genetic results with the logbook, and then they were able to take that to the court and prosecute the fishers for lying, in fact. So that's kind of the way I see this method working, because you do need that kind of level of expertise. But people need to know that it exists and that some labs can do that. So yeah, that's
But so the population in the North Sea is already strongly overfished.
yes.
And you said that maybe this fish came from the Skagerrak, so that's I don't know if it is part of the North Sea or if it is the
So there are different
Baltic Sea
population,
maybe.
the cod that are in the North Sea and in those in Skagerrak region. I mean, there is some mixing, but you can identify them using population genetic
Yes.
structure. Yeah.
But what the crime was then to tell it came from another
I can't
origin.
remember which way around it was,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
claiming it came from one of the population and it was from the other. And
Yeah.
so the lab was able to say that like with like 98% certainty. So it's never 100%. That's the problem with these types of genetic assignments. But if you combine it with something else, then you have very strong evidence. So in this case, they combined it with the logbook, but you could also combine it with, as I was saying, stable isotopes or analysis or whatever to make a strong case, depending on the question.
Yes.
The main issue that I want to point out with these types of methods, if you are going to look into where the fish was caught, is that you need to be working with a species that has strong population genetic structure. If you're talking about a species that has populations that are mixed or that do interbreed, it becomes much more difficult and possibly impossible, in fact, to use
Yes.
that method.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I've recently seen some examples for other applications where they combine different methods. And for instance, when you can combine two different LCMS or GCMS methods, and you also combine it with, let's say, strong calculation efforts, maybe with AI or machine learning, then they could achieve quite a high accuracy. So
Yep.
maybe the example as you describe it, when you have the DNA-based, the isotope-based, and you also have your let's say calculation analysis, that the combination would work quite well.
Yeah, very possible.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I don't know from the persons from the audience if someone has a question. It's I saw something happening, but I don't know if people are mute or not. Maybe when you have a question, you can unmute yourself.
They need to raise their hands or something, otherwise they won't know if
Yeah, otherwise I have another question for the first speaker. So I'm involved in a committee from the IDF about reuse in water, and that's about dairy. So you talk about dairy plants, and of course you have very complicated systems, and there's a lot of different type of water coming in. But the end game is for us is now to bring it to codex and make sure they accept it. But that would mean that you have different types of quality inside a factory that you can use for different purposes. So your technology, what kind of role could this play in such a water management system in a factory?
Well, about the different waters that we can have in a mill, for example, with this technology, if we can choose, we prefer to treat without hardness. Okay, tap water, but take out the hardness, calcium, magnesium, because it's one of the biggest problems that we can have with the performance of our technology. But in general, if the water it hasn't got any kind of oils and this kind of rust that comes from the product or whatever is the mainly problem that we have to treat. But in general, well, also for example, osmotic water with any kind of chlorides or with any kind of salts, it's a big problem for us. In that case, for example, yes, maybe we have to add a little bit of salts to increase the conductivity around 200, for example, microsieverts per centimeter. But in general, we are able to treat a lot of types of water. Yeah.
And of course, in such a factory, when let's say in a zero water dairy factory, the only water that comes in is in the milk. You also have other technologies available, like let's say nanofiltration, for instance,
Yes.
to purify or to clean. But yeah, it would when water there would be the possibility to reuse water for different purposes. Maybe in the beginning in contact with the product, but maybe later only in contact with the equipment, or used for sip cleaning, for instance. Then there would be a lot of possibility to save water.
Yes, but take into account that in this kind of technologies as with membranes, okay, or nanotechnology, or even, for example, comparing our technology with UV, just UV, that is a good option to disinfect the water that is passing through the reactor, but they don't produce oxidants with long term. Okay, so with a UV reactor, you must pass all the water through your reactor in order to disinfect as maximum as possible. In our case, we don't need to pass or to pump all the water through our reactor, because in one part we reduce with free radicals the COD, but with electrooxidation, we generate these oxidants that promotes a good sanctification of the rest of the circuit. So that's why we can put our system in many. It's not the most important thing for us is the oil of the water, for example, but not the how many retorts, for example, they do per day. We are able to treat with just one system a huge amount of example.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then I have one last question for Marine. You mentioned the word logbook in your last answer, but I was in the impression that there are quite good methods available to track where fish is being caught, so where the ships are going, but that the fishermen or the fishermen organizations are not so much in favor of being checked all the time. So I don't know what the situation is currently. Can you update me maybe?
So with respect to the fishers themselves, I'm not sure exactly at the moment what the regulatory landscape is. I can tell you that the fisheries control regulation was recently revised. And as part of that revision, what has been agreed is that the traceability system in the EU will now have to be entirely electronic. So this is quite new. Until now, there were definitely some that were using an electronic system, but the traceability in the EU of seafood was largely paper-based. And you can imagine how imperfect that is, given that we're talking about a product that has a tendency to be quite wet and slimy. So this, I think, I can't remember exactly what the implementation timeline is for this, but I think that they were planning on having it start in 2026, if I'm correct. And that means that very shortly, the entire supply chain in the EU, whether it's for imported products or products that are caught by EU vessels, is gonna have to be entirely electronic. So yeah, there was definitely some pushback from the sector, because that means that they're going to have to invest, that they're going to have to change their system. But I think ultimately everyone is going to gain from it, including the sector, because yeah, of course, that the traceability system is going to be a lot more robust, and the kind of information they need to provide all the way up to the end of the supply chain is going to be really easy to trace. It's just there's a bit of an adaptation period that makes everyone unhappy, but I think hopefully in the long run it will be beneficial for everyone. So
I think
yeah.
the let's say the food processing companies that buy the fish and want to make certain claims on their products, and also the retailers and the other sellers, they also would like to be able to make claims that are, let's say, backed up by data.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that they would be driving this. And do you know if the global dialogue on seafood traceability plays a role in this process?
In that particular process, I don't think so. That was really mostly kind of a very painful trilogue negotiations that lasted several years between the Parliament, the Council, and the European Commission, arguing as to whether or not this should be a thing, amongst many other things that was revised in the control regulation. But I mean, they certainly have advised many NGOs that do quite some lobbying, so indirectly, yes, but ultimately this is really kind of a EU decision, and I think it's for the best.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if any other person has a question. Now is your chance. And otherwise, hopefully we see Marine and Uraphex back at the Titan final event, where you will meet more colleagues, maybe that work on the same topics. Thank you very much for presenting. The webinar will be put up on the Titan webpage on YouTube, so people can look back. Thank you very much
Great.
again, and looking forward to see you.
Thank you so
Okay,
much
see you
for
again.
inviting us.
Yeah.
Thank you
okay.
very much, Eduardo. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.